because of the sheer number of journalists involved and the depth of the challenges that the event posed, both professionally and personally, that working on that in the aftermath of 9/11 really has informed everything we've done ever since. It's really shaped the work that we do. I think to understand the stakes for journalists in an event like this, you need to think about the day, in a way, for starters, and think about, first of all, that baseline choice that journalists made to go toward the site as everyone else was running away. How do you report on the recovery of remains over a period of months? There's not really a lot of precedent for that. Do we assign people to be on the site 24/7? Do people go down every day? Do we rotate shifts? At what point do we say to people, enough, we're done with this? How far after 9/11 do you keep considering it the major story? And at what point do normal stories, normal crimes, normal school stories, normal community news, not obviously inflected by 9/11, begin to make their way back into a paper or onto a website? These are all big choices that news organizations had to face. It certainly caused a lot of news organizations to rethink their approach, and it raised interest in, for example, the kind of innovations we foster at the Dart Center. How to tell stories of victims with more empathy, how to represent survivors of violence, how to include recovery and issues like PTSD in news coverage. It's not just about, are you sitting being sympathetic when you and I are talking, right? Or am I saying, how does that make you feel? I mean, it's not just about the sensitivity of the interview. It's very much about what's the subject of news. Traditionally, aftermath has not been much of a subject of news. 9/11, it became the subject here in New York, and therefore, since these are big influential news organizations, it bled out into the industry. Similarly, certainly what we saw was that 9/11 pushed a lot of news organizations to embrace some trauma education and trauma awareness for their news staffs. They realized that, no, we don't have a toolkit for reporting these stories, and there probably are things that we could learn about it. And in particular, we don't understand very well how to take care of our own staffs. Up until then, the organizations concerned about the psychological well-being of journalists covering trauma mostly were those involved in international war coverage, overseas disaster coverage, things like that. Suddenly, we had this catastrophic, murderous attack in New York City, and local media found themselves wrestling with the same question. Well, I've got reporters who are down at the site for weeks on end, and I can see it beginning to corrode their mental health. I've got a reporter who couldn't live in his own house for 3 weeks because it was dead. What do I do about all this? My people are exhausted. We've been reporting for 24/7. How do we deal with that? Should I get counseling for my staff or not? All of those issues rose in visibility very much, and a lot of interest among the American journalism community rose after 9/11 because of the scale of, not only the scale of the attacks, but the scale of journalism's involvement and implication in it.